Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 463 Mythgrid Constellation Part 1. Uriel's mood wasn't so good. Where are you, RBU? The previous fables of Kim Dokja Company were currently on the Star Stream's broadcasts, yet she couldn't pay attention to them. That couldn't be helped, though. The thoughts of previously laid-back Uriel had become rather complicated, what with everything that happened recently. The deciding factor was her running into the version of herself from the 999th world line and receiving a portion of her memories. I'm your only ally, Yu Young Hyok. I shall definitely end the scenarios and avenge you. She knew that versions of herself existed in other world lines. But she didn't expect the experiences of knowing it and meeting one would be this different. The 999th regression turns world line. Just what exactly did she do in that world? Ugh, so irritating. I'm not curious about the stories of another world line. Trying to follow the stories of my kids alone is plenty hard enough already. Uriel grumbled while hugging her head. Besides, the Starstream's atmosphere seemed rather unsettled lately. As the final scenario approached, this vague, strange sense of tension circulated among all the constellations. So much so that a groundless rumor of the Bureau abandoning this world line was doing the rounds, too. Bureau has summoned the constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire Nim. Will you answer the summon? Uriel's head shot up after hearing that sudden message. Why, with such a timing? She pondered for a moment, before tapping on the confirm button. When she did, she was transported to another location along with blinding rays of light. Transmission is complete. The place she arrived in was an unfamiliar empty field. Besides her, other constellations had arrived there before her. What's this, Gabriel? You're also here? The Bureau will spam you with messages if you refuse their call, after all. She looked around and spotted several dozen constellations gathering here. Just like her, many seemed to be curious about why they had been summoned. Even if the Bureau was a bunch of thugs, they wouldn't summon them here without a reason. Not only that, she recognized a few familiar faces, too. Such as a short height with bandages tightly wrapped around in one arm. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Isn't this our little flame dragon? Uriel dashed towards the figure of the abyssal black flame dragon and performed a headlock. Cook. An enemy sneak attack? It's me, your Archangel Nunim. Release me at once. Abyssal dragon freaked out and struggled inside Uriel's embrace. While watching that spectacle unfold, Gabriel muttered out. Uriel, that guy is an absolute evil, you know. Who cares? Eden is destroyed, anyway. We should be friends with one another. The nebula Eden was almost completely wiped out at the end of the prior Great War of Saints and Demons. Most of the once powerful Archangel army was decimated, and the only Archangels that could move were Uriel and Gabriel. The former stopped thinking about the bitter matters and scanned her vicinity. Hey, that's the Goryo's first sword, isn't he? Not only him, but also the Korean Peninsula's constellations that included Bald General of Justice, First Sorcerer of Joseon, and even Last Hero of Wangsanbeil, nebulas such as Olympus, plus a host of constellations and even Surya could be seen. Uriel's eyes moved about even more urgently than before. The more she spotted familiar constellations, the greater the foreboding grew. Every constellation gathered here, they all had one thing in common. The abyssal dragon finally managed to extract himself from her grasp and muttered loudly. Everyone here is from Kim Dokja's channel. He was right, everyone gathered here, they. Pachuchit. Right then, Uriel's perception picked up on the movement of a threatening status. Beings were surrounding this empty field. Each and every one of them possessed more than enough status to almost rival a Fable-grade constellation. Uriel and her quick wits immediately saw through their identity. Papyrus, Vedas, and even Emperor. What is the meaning of this? To think that you lot with plenty of bad blood between you would unite like this. Uriel spoke up, feeling slightly tense. Even if it was her, fighting off against this many Fable-grade constellations was asking for too much. Not only that. Even a bum-heavy geezer, too. What brings an existence from the final scenario here? She was sure of it, the goosebumps rising up on her arms were proof of the incredibly powerful being's existence hiding nearby. Even if Starstream was vast, there were only a handful of beings possessing this level of status. She glanced to the side and noticed that even the abyssal dragon was making a visibly hardened expression. There was no doubt, this creature, it was. Is everyone here? A true myth-grade constellation. Suchachachuchit. The moment that true voice rang out, the surrounding air suddenly changed. It felt as if the oxygen floating around was ignited instantly. The sensation was so strong that the constellations near her wobbled unsteadily, while even Uriel, renowned for her high resistance to fire, couldn't help but frown deeply for a moment there. Why was a myth-grade constellation here? With the very rare exceptions like the King of the Underworld, Metatron or the Great Sage, the majority of myth-grade constellations didn't interfere with the matters of lower-ranked scenarios. Because they were beings that had already completed their conclusion and placed their names on the candidate list for the one single fable. They had already reached the final scenario, and their fables had been guaranteed. Looks like the Monkey Bee * starred and the King of the Underworld are the only absentees. However, it's not possible to delay any further, so I shall start with the explanation. Hold up. Constellation, Midday Sun is looking at demon-like Judge of Fire. The moment she met that gaze, Uriel realized who the owner of that true voice was. There were many suns to be found within the star stream. However, suns that occupied the center of the universe were extremely rare even among them. Especially so, if it was an existence that occupied the midday smack bang in the middle of time itself. God of the Sun, Ra. Did you summon us here? He was none other than Ra, the top constellation of the Great Nebula, Papyrus. Correct. How odd. I thought that the Bureau called us here? Ra didn't reply to her. Actually, Uriel could sense a presence of great Dakibi among all the others surrounding her. She decided to calmly respond for now. If that side really chose to align themselves with the Bureau even at the exorbitant loss of their probability, then this situation couldn't be described as good at all. Okay, so. Shall we hear what's so important that you're even willing to expose your cozy relationship with the Bureau? I've summoned you here because of the final scenario. Soon, the one single fable will be chosen. Meaning, the story that will represent this world line will be decided. The one single fable. There was not one constellation present that didn't know what that was. Even the Kim Dokja company they had been watching until now was a nebula creating their. Most of you have not earned the right of the final scenario. However, it'll be a different story if you side with me. I shall take you to the final scenario. Meaning, I shall give you an opportunity to place your modifiers on the one single fable. That proposition caused the eyes of a few constellations to rock visibly. Most of them were unaffiliated, historical figure grades. Uriel observed Ra for a moment there, before breaking out in a smirk. What the hell, that's it? It wasn't anything important, so if you're done talking, I'm leaving. She turned around, but couldn't take another step. An incredibly powerful status had rooted her to the spot. What's the meaning of this? I haven't finished talking yet. But, I can already guess what you're about to say without hearing it. Uriel's true voice carried a sharp edge. Only the constellations from the channel BY9158 and not any others were brought here. And the one who gathered them was none other than the top constellation of Papyrus. You're about to propose that we attack the Kim Dokja company, right? For a very short moment there, silence dominated the proceedings. Why do you think that? Because they earned the qualification of the final scenario, that's why. And eliminating them naturally would lead to one of the strongest candidates for the one single fable exiting the picture. Visible turmoil spread among the constellations. Uriel sensed the statuses of the constellations surrounding them get agitated as well. She snorted derisively. Really now, you lot called constellations just don't change even until the end, no? And also, RA. You have already reached the final scenario, so interfering in the lower scenario like this is really petty, you know. Zeus, and even you. Are you by any chance worried about your kids? You angry that your offsprings that inherited your fable couldn't win against fledgling Nebula and failed to become the candidates of the one final fable, and there was an incredible explosion, and Uriel's figure was buried deep into the ground. As she spat out a slew of expletives, Ra's true voice entered her ears. Phew, what the hell? Indeed, you're correct. This is the rage of a parent who didn't educate his children properly. This is the righteous rage of a parent who couldn't sit still and watch his children's future go astray because of pathetic losers who gave up on their conclusions, and a little Nebula not even a decade old. As if she was already expecting that, Uriel shouted back. And you finally reveal your true colors. Sorry, but there are no constellations here who will side with your kids. Looks like you don't know whose channel we're subscribers of. The Abyssal Dragon and Gabriel reached out and helped Uriel out of the crater. Behind them, the Korean Peninsula's constellations, including Goryo's first sword and bald general, were nodding their heads. Uriel felt this inexplicable sense of contentment after meeting their gazes. Right now, here in this place, folks that cheered on someone's fable in one heart had gathered. From the start of the first scenario, the proof of credentials, all the way to the final scenario where the fate of the world line was to be decided. Uriel couldn't be certain that everyone here thought the same as her. However, without a doubt, someone among these people must have loved Kim Dokja Company's fable more than their own. Just like she did. And that is why you're all losers. What? Have you all lost yourselves to voyeurism and forgotten that you are also a part of the scenario? In the next moment, a powerful storm of probabilities aftermath whipped about and a certain figure made an entrance. Su-cha-cha-chat. It was a doll with an exterior of steel. A fable-grade constellation riddled with wounds was bound by the sturdy ring of light. This fool had been supporting a stupid fable, just like you have. Uriel dazedly stared at this constellation. She had never met this guy before, yet the moment he appeared, she could tell who he might be. Not only that, she had exchanged several indirect messages with him in the past, too. Constellation, Master of Steel, is shrinking back from pain. The Master of Steel. He was the incarnation Hyansung's sponsor. Ra's laughter could be heard next. He would have been safe if he remained quietly back in Oz, yet this fool got in touch with an existence from another world line, hoping to aid that stupid fable. Just what the hell are you? You all do not have a choice. Either you help us put an end to Kim Dokja Company's fable, or... Along with those words, the rings of light binding the Master of Steel's body began tightening. He thrashed in pain but still stared straight at Uriel. Constellation, Master of Steel, says that his death today has no meaning. Constellation, Master of Steel, announces that his fable and modifier have been succeeded by someone else. The ring was getting tighter and tighter. Uriel hurriedly moved. And then... Constellation, Master of Steel, asks you not to give up on that story. Squeeze. The Master of Steel's body got crushed without any resistance whatsoever, and fables exploded out from his body. It was truly a meaningless death of a fable-grade constellation. Everyone from the same channel watched that spectacle as if they were frozen to the spot. In front of a planet's death, RA continued to speak. Or, die like this one. Along with a madness-filled roar, Uriel unleashed her status in full. Chapter 464. Mythgrade Constellation. Part 2. Goo-goo-goo-goo. Like a breaking glass, the sky above cracked apart with black lines running through it. Hyansung stared at the heavens, filling up with rifts, and asked me, Sergeant Kim Dokjeon, are we really going to be alright? I too had to look up after listening to him. The world seemed to be crumbling down. The reason for that was clear: someone was attacking us from the outside. Not just anyone, but incredibly powerful beings, no less. I turned back and discovered my companions looking at me: Yu Yung Hyuk, Han Soo Young, Yu Sang-ah, Jang Hui-won. I didn't have to say it, but we already knew what our choice would be. It'll be fine. Do you think I'm a sergeant just for a show? Don't worry about a thing. Asterisk. The sky was breaking down. Yet, how could he say it was all fine? Lee Hyun-sung couldn't quite understand it. Was the military originally like this? Kim Dokja simply smiled quietly. A calm, collected smile floated upon his face. Sergeant Kim Dokja would only say this. Even the squad leader will tell you it's fine. Indeed, the squad leader really did gather the soldiers in the training ground a short while later and began her speech. She might be small-statured, but still, was overflowing with charisma. With an unreadable expression on her face, she scanned the rest of the troops and opened her mouth. Your squad leader, me, is really disappointed in you. That unexpected opening caused the soldiers to tense up. You have not read web novels during your downtime. Lee Hyun-sung inwardly flinched. It was true. Even yesterday, he didn't read web novels during his break but practiced the military gymnastics routine with Yu Yung Hyuk. And so, this squad leader is planning to leave this base. Lee Hyun-sung became stupefied by that unexpected declaration. She was leaving? Hushed murmurs could be heard coming from here and there. And Lee Hyun-sung. When he regained his wits, she was already beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Private Second Class Lee Hyun-sung, ma'am. This would be his first time seeing her up close. Her name and rank could be seen on top of her neatly arranged uniform. Captain Han Soo-young, that was her rank, and her name. How long are you planning to stay dazed? You better start moving. You wish to see Kim Dokja kicking the bucket? Why was this? For a moment there, a stinging pain accompanied a set of strange memories brushing past his mind. What was that just now? Look, you're stupefied again. Private Second Class Lee Hyun-sung. The squad leader stared at him with unreadable eyes, before lightly patted him on his cheek. You better read more books, okay? You're slow, so you simply have to read lots more books. You'll survive for longer that way. Squad leader Han Soo-young left behind indecipherable words and left the base. Asterisk. 2 days after Captain Han Soo-young left. The cracks in the skies were growing larger. It was like seeing the first signs of a world coming to an end. Lee Hyun-sung, have you memorized the exercise routine yet? He looked behind to discover Private First Class Yu Yung Hyuk. Private Second Class Lee Hyun-sung. I've memorized everything. You filled up the army issue canteen, too? I've filled it up with exactly 2 liters. Lee Hyun-sung felt a bit scared by that pair of sharp, angry eyes. He hadn't made any mistakes, yet they remained critical. What about the barracks code of conduct? Private Second Class Lee Hyun-sung. That, I haven't. The moment he said that, he inwardly went, oops, I'll get scolded again. He swallowed nervously, and just as he tried to squeeze his eyes shut, heard Yu Yung Hyuk's voice. You should be able to memorize it soon. It's not that long, anyway. Pardon? Ah, you must have heard me wrong. No, I have not. What on earth was going on here? He made 2 consecutive mistakes just now, yet Yu Yung Hyuk didn't criticize him. Not only that, those scary eyes were no longer angry when looking back at Lee Hyun-sung. I will be shipping out tomorrow. I don't quite follow, senior? Lee Hyun-sung, you can't refer to the field manual on everything. You won't find a senior willing to aid you every single time. Why was this? Why did Private First Class Yu Yung Hyuk's back turning around to leave feel so familiar to him? There will come a time when you must make a choice not found within the manual. Those were the last words left behind by the Private First Class Yu Yung Hyuk. Asterisk. Members of the squad began disappearing one by one. First, it was Captain Han Soo-young, Private First Class Yu Young Hyok, followed by Lieutenant Yu Sang-ah. When he regained his wits, the non-commissioned officer, Sergeant First Class Jong Hui-won, had become the squad's top presiding commander. Even though the situation made no sense, Lee Hyun-sung told himself it couldn't be helped because it was emergency. Lee Hyun-sung's daily tasks after performing the morning and evening roll call were to check the base's infrastructure or accompany Sergeant Kim Dok-ja to the barracks library. The military nowadays even stock wuxia novels? Wow, this is a really old book, too. Kim Dok-ja loved books. Actually, it went beyond a simple love affair. He was the kind of a man who spent the whole day reading books. Lee Hyun-sung would sit next to him and quietly observe him excitedly flip the pages. "Don't you want to read, too?" No, I'm... Before Lee Hyun-sung could reply, yet another boom spread out from the sky. Kim Dok-ja's expression faintly hardened. When the boom was heard for the first time 4 days ago, Captain Han Soo-young went away, and after the second boom 2 days ago, Private First Class Yu Young Hyok disappeared next. Lee Hyun-sung grew restless. Kim Dok-ja, Sergeant Nim. Ing? By any chance, are you also leaving, sir? People were leaving him behind. He was continuously losing something. Kim Dok-ja smirked softly. Probably. I'm a sergeant already. I gotta get discharged soon. I'm definitely not planning to make a career out of this place. I see. You also want to get out of here as soon as possible, right? Lee Hyun-sung was about to reply with, "Yes, I do," but then, his eyes suddenly caught the sight of barbed wire fences outside the windows. They looked so sturdy and intimidating. Why did he feel this, though? He felt fearful of going outside those fences. If he carelessly went beyond the fences, he'd definitely get hurt. However, they would become barriers protecting him as long as he stayed inside. When he thought like that, he felt his heart calm down. The skies were falling. There was an unknown world outside where code of conduct for living in barracks or the military gymnastics exercise held no meaning. He shifted his gaze back to discover Kim Dok-ja staring at him. The sergeant's lips bobbed up and down as if he wanted to say something, but then, a sly grin suddenly formed on his lips. "Hey, if you wish to leave, you better read more books, man. Will reading lots of books reduce the period of active service?" Kim Dok-ja's lips twitched after hearing that question. Reading a book and writing a report on it might be enough to get you a vacation. A book report? See, there will be a book report contest being held within our division. Read that and apply for it. If yours get picked, you'll get time off as a prize. The notice board Kim Dok-ja pointed at had a poster advertising the Army's book report contest. Lee Hyun-sung learned for the first time that such a thing existed. So it was true, this book report thing. If he wrote that, he'd be able to earn some time off the base. "When you're finished, you gotta let me read it, okay?" It was after the following morning's roll call that Sergeant Kim Dok-ja had vanished. Asterisk. It's only us two remaining, so who cares about daily tasks? Sergeant First Class Jong Hui-won grumbled loudly. Lee Hyun-sung smiled sheepishly and pulled out weeds growing near the base. "Well, we don't know what might happen, ma'am. The squad leader might suddenly return, and..." Jong Hui-won sat on a bench and while resting her chins on her hands, watched Lee Hyun-sung as if he was a mysterious new life form. "Do you like this place?" The usual Sergeant First Class wouldn't have used such a tone of voice. However, her voice still managed to elicit this inexplicable sense of longing in him. Maybe it was that longing allowing him to reply honestly right away. "It's neither like or dislike, ma'am." A place that he neither liked or disliked. That was exactly what Lee Hyun-sung's impression on the military was. Except that, I don't have to think about anything while I'm here. That's right, that was the reason why he chose the army. While he was here, he could forget about the outside world. Employment, enrollment, gazes of others, issues of the outside world, family affairs, dilemmas he could never solve no matter what he did. But then, I've been thinking lately that I kind of like it here. What did he exactly like about this place, anyway? He couldn't describe it properly. I like you. And why did his heart ache so much? Sergeant First Class John Hui-Wan, looking straight at him, suddenly spoke up. In that case, you stay here, Hyun-sung. Wait for us until we come back. He couldn't reply with I didn't quite catch you. Because he simply couldn't mishear what she was saying. We'll protect your world. The moment he wanted to say something, blinding rays of light poured down from the sky, and the Sergeant First Class John Hui-Wan disappeared from his view. Kudu-doo-doo. Before anyone had noticed it, the cracks in the skies had already swallowed up half of the heavens. And so, Hyun-sung became alone. Asterisk. Just what am I doing? Is this place really an army base? The army that I knew is. Hyun-sung repeated his daily tasks and continued to protect the base with no one in it. He woke up at the fixed time, did his roll call, and did the military gymnastics routine. After that, he finished disciplining his mind and began his daily tasks. However, he had no more things to do now. He even finished pulling out all the weeds found in the base yesterday. The book report. He belatedly recalled Kim Dokja's words. He was told to write a report. To read a book and write his report on it. Hyun-sung went up to the barracks library. As if to let the world know that Kim Dokja used to be here, there was a pile of books gathered up on that spot. He reached out to the book on top of that pile, all the while sensing this strange feeling. The book itself was a familiar one. The Wizard of Oz, Ver. 999. Even he had heard of this book's name from somewhere. However, he had never read it before. Hyun-sung flipped the cover open and began reading the first sentence. The tin soldier was scared of having a heart. A tin soldier, was it? It must have been the Wizard of Oz's protagonist. He continued to flip through the pages. The first comrade the tin soldier met was a really scary man. The tin soldier called him Captain. The moment he read that line, his head pulsed in pain. Captain? The tin soldier then became comrades with a beautiful angel. When that angel became angry, she'd often morph into a devil. For some reason, his heart ached when he read those lines. The tin soldier became comrades with a warrior wearing thick armor. The warrior used his own sword to test out the tin soldier's strength now and then. Why did it feel like this description would come to life right before his eyes at any second? The tin soldier became comrades with a dragon, spitting out fearsome flames. The dragon sometimes acted like a nuisance, too. But, I've never met an existence like that before? And then, a demon king coming from another world stole away what was most precious to them. Every time he read a sentence, all sorts of chaotic scenes and screams flitted in and out of his vision. He was unfamiliar with those spectacles. Even then, Hyun-sung's entire body shivered. He couldn't understand it. He didn't get what this story was about. He simply didn't get what the author was trying to convey. Worse still, he couldn't understand why tears were welling up in his eyes. And at the end of this story, the tin soldier realized what the aching in his heart was. That aching eventually became his heart. As soon as he read that line, Hyun-sung recalled it. I too once had comrades like them. I'd love to hear your story, Hyun-sung SSI, when all these tragedies come to an end and our stories are no longer treated as scenarios. The first comrade was a polite and warm person. Everyone followed his lead. Until then, everyone being safe is the utmost priority. The second comrade was a kind person. Everyone believed her words to be correct. No, hang on. It's more important that everyone survives, even at the cost of one person. Of course, that one person must be Kim Dokja. That fool knows how to come back from being dead, anyway. The third comrade was a wise person. Everyone thought that the strategies she cooked up will succeed. No one will die. Leave this place to me and go. The fourth comrade was a powerful person. Everyone could entrust their backs to him. You know, Mr. Hyansong. If I ever forget about you, then, and the fifth comrade was. Then, please kill me. His memories were coming back to him. Slowly, so very slowly, his heart began beating. So slowly, yet with a distinctive feeling, each beat did its very best to emphasize that they were hurting this way, that this was where such ache existed. How could he have ever forgotten about them? Lee Hyansong clenched his fists, his body shivering away. He shouldn't be in this place. He looked up at the skies outside the windows. The cracks of the skies had covered the entirety of the heavens by now. It became rather clear where his companions had gone off to. They went away to protect this world he was stuck in. All the while facing off against the calamities that measly North Korea couldn't even compare to. Lee Hyansong thought to himself. Do I possess such powers? Constellation, Master of Steel, is looking at you. His sponsor was now looking at him. Suchut, suchut. However, something felt different from before. It must have been his sponsor, yet there was a slight, vague difference in the gaze he sensed. Constellation, Master of Steel, asks if you're hurting. Lee Hyansong nodded his head. This emotion, this heart, I wish to protect it. He was scared. Scared of forgetting this moment again, scared of his heart stop beating again. Scared of everything freezing up within the cold silvery light. It was then, his sponsor spoke to him. You can protect it. His voice resembled forged steel, tempered for tens of thousands of years. However, you may end up in agony for all eternity as the consequences of failing to protect it. Even then, it's fine. It's better than not even having a chance to protect them. He was only familiar with the things he had lost already. The important part was about not losing them again. Your name is the Emperor of Steelsword. He saw the barbed wire fences in the distance crumble away. The world of manuals he had been protecting was disappearing. Lee Hyansong stepped forward towards his own story. Asterisk. Dokja SSI. We were currently protecting the crumbling Oz. With the decline of the fables of the Master of Steel and the Wizard of Oz, Oz's anti-air defense system was crumbling down. I could see hundreds of battleships surrounding Oz. We shared our strength and protected the planet with a hole in it from that armada. Even then, we were reaching our limit. The other side relied mainly on the long-range attacks from their ships. The only methods we had of defending against that effectively were E.G. Hai's Turtle Dragon and Shin Yusung's Chimera Dragon. The problem here was that neither E.G. Hai's vessel and Shin Yusung's dragon had fully recovered from the damages incurred during the Great War of Saints and Demons. We originally came here to address that issue, but the anti-air defense will be rendered powerless soon. We got ready for the final showdown. Zhang Huiwan asked. Still can't contact any other constellations? Something bad must have happened. It was likely that these guys attacking us were involved in that. Han Suyang grumbled loudly. You really aren't going to regret this? Should we really be doing this? I nodded my head. Lee Hyansong always fought for us in the front lines. It's our turn to repay that debt. My companions agreed with me. Yu Yonghyuk was currently on top of the tallest building on the planet, while Zhang Huiwan was emitting powerful status that didn't lose out to anyone, her resolve firm, unwavering. We'll believe in Lee Hyansong. I wasn't sure exactly how much time we could buy here. Just that, I could only pray it was enough for Lee Hyansong. Incoming. Kaboom. Hundreds of battleships in the distance spat out flames simultaneously. Magical shells, their numbers more than enough to utterly decimate a planet in its entirety, rained down. We unleashed all of our statuses. We needed to withstand this wave of attack no matter what. After gathering all of our magical, right next moment, a vast silvery light suddenly enveloped the whole world. The enormous protective barrier made out of fable metal spread out among the heavens. Through the semi-transparent barrier, I saw the shells of the battleships powerlessly explode on the outside. Being left alone in a place like that was not a happy experience, you know. This was not the fable of the Wizard of Oz. No, it was a new type of fable, with a somewhat different origin. In that world, he was referred to as the Emperor of Steelsword. Quack 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 quack. Chills ran down my spine. Steam covered the entire planet. Metal spreading out like a giant tree's branches began blanketing the surface of the planet itself. This was the hardest material found in Starstream, the only fable metal capable of dealing with the myth-grade constellation's frightening weapons. A large number of constellations are astonished by the scale of this fable. And here it was, the stigma powerful enough to completely envelop a planet with that metal. That was the anti-air defense system that the planet Oz proudly boasted, the Last Steel. Captain Hyun-sung, from the Giant Monsters Special Command, reporting. The man I was familiar with, blessed a height taller than Yu Young Hyox, and boasting the sturdiest body. I have been discharged from the active service today. Stars of the skies could be seen staggering back now. Constellations from Nebula, Papyrus, are astonished by the revival of the Master of Steel. And now, it was the time for the counterattack. Chapter 465. Mythgrade Constellation. Part 3. You have become a Great Dakibi. You can now participate in the Great Dakibi's final ballot. Baihyung looked at the messages and slowly blinked. His appearance had changed a lot since meeting the Dakibi king. He was now in a complete humanoid figure like Baram, with the white tiger leather draped over his shoulders and 3 yellow horns emanating the powers of fable on his head. He had now become a full-on Great Dakibi. I shall be on my way now, Baram Nim. Are you planning to go to them? Baihyung didn't reply. But Baram continued on, anyway. All Dakibis must select their own final stories when the end of times draws near. Even if they could die telling that particular story. The story you're about to select has very low odds of victory. I'm aware. Not only that, they have made enemies of the Bureau and quite a number of other great Dakibis, too. I'm also aware of that. There was no Dakibi alive who didn't know what it meant to become enemies with the Bureau in Starstream. Even still, I'd like to see the end of this world with that story. Baihyung had chosen his last fable. Asterisk. Dokja SSI. Have you come out to enjoy your vacation? Don't be like that. I told you, it's not a vacation but a discharge. A real discharge, then? Yes. Hyun-sung smiled brightly. I won't be a soldier anymore. I observed the silvery fable leaking out from his entire figure. When reading the opening sentences of some novels, you get a certain sense of what they are like, and fables were similar in that regard. That resolute silver hue. The unwavering will, tempered through a lengthy period of time. Back in the Isle of Reincarnators, the one invincible fist Ju Hosung said this, in order to rule over certain fables, you needed to understand it first. However, just like how it was impossible to fully understand another human being, it was also impossible to fully understand a fable. What we can do instead, is to come up with an interpretation of our own. In that case, this was the answer Hyun-sung had come up with. Fable, Ruler of Steel, has begun its storytelling. That was the core fable, possessed by the Master of Steel. The fact that he could finally wield it meant that Hyun-sung had reached the last phase in the Steel transformation. I didn't get to write a report, but I still understood why you asked me to read that book, Dokja SSI, said Hyun-sung before reverting to a more cautious voice. Was that perhaps the story from the 999th regression turn world line? I was somewhat surprised. Didn't expect that he'd think that far ahead. I believe that might be the case. But then, why was that story transformed into The Wizard of Oz? From my own knowledge base, Oz's founding fable was The Wizard of Oz. However, the fable forming its foundation had been altered. Not only that, to a story from the 999th turn, no less. I wasn't sure what all this meant yet, but still, I could think of something. The meaning of altering the basis of a fable was quite clear, after all. Sponsor of Incarnation Hyun-sung is now looking at you. I might have not noticed the faintly altered gaze if it was in the past. It was not the same aura of the Master of Steel I knew of. I shifted my gaze towards the Emerald Tower where that altar was located at. And then, recalled the large steel sword I saw in the audience chamber. Hyansonga Juicy. Our companions preparing for the enemy's attacks below the tower rushed towards us. Hyansonga Juicy. Are you alright? Xing Yusung and Yi Gilyong jumping around grasped the tall, sturdy man's hands tightly. Yu Yung Hyok arriving a step later muttered out. Looks like you were safely discharged. Both Yu Sangha and Han Suyong decided to chime in, too. Congratulations on your discharge. If you need your squad leader again, just give me a shout. The last person to rush in was Zhang Huiwen, who was getting ready to fend off the enemy's attacks in the farthest location. She stopped about a dozen meters or so away, and while her lips twitched, she kept staring in this direction. Yi Hyansong smiled at her. Huiwen SSI. I began wondering if I should make my exit from here about now. But the person who solved that dilemma was a completely unexpected person. Hey, you lot. Do your emotional reunion later. It's not over yet, you know. E.G. Hai shouted out as she summoned the turtle dragon in the air. She was right. The nebulas outside the planet hadn't withdrawn their battle line yet. No, rather than retreating, an even higher number of battleships were actually showing up now. Among them were dreadnoughts exclusively designed for destroying planets and internebula warfare. Do not worry. I won't leave them alone, said our trustworthy Yi Hyansong as he stepped forward. For sure, they were still bombarding us on the outside, but Oz's barrier was holding firm. Like I said before, the strength of Master of Steel's fable inside Oz would almost match a myth-grade constellation's. Chaik. A rather ominous-sounding noise could be heard coming from somewhere. A foul smell akin to something burning wafted out. I raised my head to discover that a side of the opaque barrier was being ignited in the shower of blinding sparks as if it was being welded open. Something was melting down Yi Hyansong's forged steel. Constellation, Midday Sun, is staring at the planet Oz. Right then, I sensed Yi Hyansong's body stiffen up greatly. He had covered the whole planet for us, so no doubt he was currently fully exposed to the status of that gaze. Even if he was almost on the level of a myth-grade constellation, that still didn't mean he was equal to one. I placed my hand on his shoulder. His trembling lessened a little after receiving a share of the nebula's probability. One shouldn't fight alone just because he had gotten a little bit stronger. Because, we were a nebula, just like them. Looks like a real big shot has personally made an entrance. I knew of the modifier of Midday Sun. Now normally, that guy should never be able to come here. It was the top constellation of the nebula, Papyrus. And the meaning of him coming here personally could only be. Constellation, Midday Sun, has revealed its intention to the Starstream. That he no longer wished to hide their true intentions. Nebula, Papyrus, has revealed their animosity towards Nebula, Kim Dokja Company. Two nebulas recorded as the candidates for one single fable are clashing. The expressions of the companions hardened after receiving that never-before-seen message. Something was about to get underway. Nebula, Papyrus, has declared internebula warfare against Nebula, Kim Dokja Company. It was exceedingly rare in Starstream for a great nebula to officially declare war against another. Because internebula warfare would never lead to a good result for all sides involved. There must have been a reason for them declaring one right now, even though they knew the truth. Conditions to activate the restricted main scenario has been satisfied. Applicable scenario will be issued only to the nebulas recorded as the candidates of one single fable. Plus. Main scenario number 98, Candidate Selection War, Restricted, Type, Main. Difficulty? Clear condition, all nebulas recorded in the one single fable can now freely engage in internebula warfare. It's possible to declare war without any penalties, and alliances and request for support between other nebulas are now fully allowed. Emerging victorious in the candidate selection war will ensure that you receive Starstream S attention, and your odds of being selected as the one single fable will improve. Time limit. Reward, increase in the nebula's profile. Acquisition of myth-grade fable related to internebula warfare. Failure, reduction in the nebula's profile. Qualification for the final scenario rescinded. Plus. I knew it. Currently, your nebula is in war with Papyrus. Please defeat the enemy camp's leader. You will be accredited with victory points if you win the applicable warfare. Visibly tense companions quickly gathered around me. Hostility incomparably heavier than any other we felt in the past was enveloping the whole planet. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation is glaring at Nebula, Papyrus. We had fought large nebulas a couple of times in the past. Back in Gigantomachia, we fought against Olympus, and during the Journey to the West remake, against Emperor. However, the story this time was completely different. The restrictions on the probability during Gigantomachia were so great that constellations couldn't really exercise their full powers, while during Journey to the West remake, the great sage Heaven's Equal and the members of judging panel lent us their powers and their probability. So, what about now? Fable, Demon King of Salvation, has begun its storytelling. Was there any nebula that might help us now? Great Fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Companions were now looking at me. They all looked to have made up their minds. Their eyes were proof that they knew what was about to happen and where our new battlefield was. Let's go. No one would come to help us. I looked up at the sky and spoke. We're not weaklings anymore. Please open the sky, Hyansong SSI. Hyansong nodded his head. Incarnation Zhang Huiwen is requesting the activation of Hour of Judgment. Zhang Huiwen unsheathed her sword first. The judge's sword was enveloped in the auras of God slaying. Incarnation Hyansong has agreed with the judgment. Hyansong's forged steel was placed on top of the companion's equipment. This was the world's toughest oath to protect his precious comrades. Incarnation E.G. Hai has agreed with the judgment. The silver-colored fable metal settled down on E.G. Hai's turtle dragon. Incarnation Xin Yusung has agreed with the judgment. Incarnation E. Gilyang has agreed with the judgment. The Chimera Dragon 2 was dyed in the silvery hue. The monster roared out and carried the two kids into flight. Incarnation Yu Seng-ah has agreed with the judgment. Lotus pedestals, also reinforced by silver-colored steel, began rotating all around Yu Seng-ah. Incarnation Han Suyang has agreed with the judgment. Han Suyang had unwrapped the bandages off her arm before anyone noticed it, and tied her hair with the very same bandages. Incarnation Yu Yung Hyok has agreed with the judgment. Yu Yung Hyok's dark heavenly demon sword, carrying the status of a transcender, began emitting cold sword light next. And Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, has agreed with the judgment. And I unsheathed the unbreakable faith. Hour of Judgment will now activate. The moment the pitch-black night sky opened up, we all boarded E.G. Hai's vessel and leapt towards the heavens above. The enemy's armada grew closer. We grasped our individual weapons as we faced off against an armada at least 600 ships strong. This was the spectacle that Kim Dokja had been longing to see for a very long time. Zhang Huiwen was the first to dash out and her sword attack rained down. The strongest swordswoman of chaos that I know of was Zhang Huiwen, the judge of apocalypse. Kugugugugu. A dreadnought was penetrated cleanly through from its cockpit right down to its engine bay, and explosion noises resounded out. Soon, explosions both large and small erupted out from all over its hull as cracks spreading all over it. We got to see the constellations riding on it hurriedly make their escape. Not missing that opening, E.G. Hai's turtle dragon began its violent assault. Boom! Our vessel broke through the explosions, emerging unscathed. Hyansong's fable metal had protected everyone. E.G. Hai stepped forward. She was the greatest incarnation there was when it came to large-scale warfare, capable of destroying 100+ enemy ships with only one vessel. The Naval Admiral E.G. Hai ordered the shelling to commence. A juicy, "We're going, too." Following on the cannon fires, Shin Yusung's Chimera Dragon also took flight, as well. The leader had to be brought down first to end this warfare. So, as we had a small number of participants, there was only one choice we could make, really, an all-out blitzkrieg. Shin Yusung the Beast Lord, and Yi Gilyong the Insect King. Two of the most complete tamers that I knew of carved out a path for us. Chimera Dragon, under Shin Yusung's control, fired the breath to accurately strike down mid-sized enemy ships, while Yi Gilyong's insects crawled through any open gaps found to deal with dozens of smaller vessels trying to rush in at us. "Stop right there." Insects crawled into the engines of smaller vessels and caused a series of huge explosions, thrusting the battlefield into pure chaos instantly. Perhaps thinking that this couldn't go on anymore, Fable-grade constellations began crawling out from the battleships, one by one. Incarnation, Yu Sang-ah, is unleashing her status. Fable, Hour of Mandala, is activating. The moment Yu Sang-ah activated her Fable, the movements of the enemy constellations slowed down visibly. That shocked me. I was already aware of her inheriting a portion of Sakyamana's powers, but didn't expect her to wield this much of an authority over it. An ability to control the flow of time itself? "I can't continue this for long," said Yu Sang-ah. "It won't take that long." Taking advantage of the time she bought for us, Yu Yung-hyuk, Han Soo-young, and I ran on the night sky. Great Fable, Demon World Spring is continuing on with its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch That Swallowed the Myth, has begun its storytelling. The two great fables that protected Kim Dokja Company until now, we had been using these two as our main attack power so far. The aura of the fables stretched on like the tail of a meteor. The space we flew past was engraved with sparkling stars. We had already broken past countless battleships, yet hundreds of constellations were still blocking our path. If we cowered even for a moment here, their status would force us back and crush us to death with sheer pressure. Nebula Papyrus is unleashing the Great Fable status. And so, this was the fight between two nebulas. It's my turn now. Originally, the Demon of Delusions Kim Nam-won should have been where Han Soo-young was now. However, not only had she performed that guy's role admirably, she had become an existence far surpassing him. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness has begun its storytelling. Finally, our third Great Fable began telling its story, as well. The distant cry of the Apocalypse Dragon could be heard like an auditory hallucination. We saw the Papyrus S constellations that participated in the Great War of Saints and Demons tremble in fear. This is. The heavens split into two, one in light and the other in darkness, as stage transformation was activated. Han Soo-young's figure soared higher as she stepped on the blurred boundary between the light and darkness. The wings of Abyssal Black Flame Dragon spread out wide behind her back. Just like back when she swooped in to rescue me, purple-colored, black flames were raging on both of her fists. Kwaya. We rode on the storm of the fable and advanced forward. This was the overwhelming splendor of a great fable that not even the fable-grade constellations could contend with. We advanced forward like the Apocalypse Dragon's shockwave. But then, a gigantic sun stepped in to block us. Constellation, Midday Sun, is staring at Kim Dokja Company. A lone pitch-black figure stood in the center of the blinding ball of light. That was the sun god Ra's true body. "You shall all die here today." Yu Yung-hyuk's dark heavenly demon sword roared on with a vicious howl. Every fable we possessed also howled and roared on. Even if it was just us two fighting together, facing off against a true myth-grade constellation was still asking a lot. After all, we were only in the third turn, so. Hang on, third turn? Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, has begun its storytelling. It was like that once upon a time. Reading together has begun. After images of pages flipping past entered my eyes. As the hellish landscape filled up the surroundings, my story began. On the road created out of countless letters, Yu Yunghayok ran on his lengthy lifetime. The 41st turned Yu Yunghayok through a spear, and the 362nd turned Yu Yunghayok extended his scepter. The 999th turned Yu Yunghayok wielded his demon sword. Su-cha-cha-chut. Violent sparks began digging into my body. Your status can't handle your reading comprehension. For a brief moment during the journey to the west, I managed to read up to the 1863rd turn. But that was only possible because the great sage and outer gods lent me their probability. This is the true myth. Even after taking on Yu Yunghayok's falling, breaking the sky swordsmanship, RA didn't even budge. You cannot surpass the true myth. The minimum regression turn of Yu Yunghayok needed to bring down a myth-grade constellation was 1700th. I lacked power and lacked in status. However, I didn't back down. No, we can surpass it. Because we still had one more fable up our sleeve. The fourth great fable we earned by clearing the Journey to the West remake. Great Fable, Liberator of the Forgotten Ones has begun its storytelling. In the next moment, an abundant amount of a fable's probability permeated into my entire being. The fable that the great sage and outer gods worked together to create was now roiling about over the contexts of my Star and Kim Dokja company. Starstream is greatly surprised by your status. Starstream is currently reassessing your status. Stinging bloody odor stabbed into my nose. The Tongtian River dyed in red from the corpses of outer gods appeared around us. The sparks trying to drown me gradually lessened. The pages of the hellscape began flipping past once more. 1321 ST turn. 1582 ND turn. And eventually, 1701st turn. Yu Yunghayok moved, his dark heavenly demon sword, now loaded with the power from the 1701st regression turn. The Yu Yunghayok from then that cut the oceans apart, destroyed the sun, and carved out the myth-grade constellation Poseidon's heart, was now opening his eyes. And this is the sight Kim Dokja longed to see for a very long time. We could see RA freak out and belatedly unleash his own great fable. I stared straight into Ra's eyes. That bastard's lips were mouthing, but, how? I laughed. What do you mean, how? In order to kill a myth-grade constellation, you needed a power that equaled one. The myth-grade constellation, existences that started their one single story and had earned their conclusion, or compiled their own incredible great fables and reached the cusps of their conclusion that way. Absolute majority of constellations are greatly shocked by your status. Your status has caused the constellations from great nebulas, too. Just like me right now, in other words. Starstream has announced your new status. Your status is myth-grade. A stupendous boom resounded out as Yu Yunghayok's dark heavenly demon sword cut Ra's sun down. Chapter 466. Myth-grade constellation. Part 4. A large number of nebulas are freaking out at your status. Portion of nebulas are freaking out at the sudden appearance of a new myth-grade constellation. Portion of constellations are requesting the probability suitability evaluation to the Bureau. Su-cha-cha-chut. Requests for the probability suitability evaluation have been denied. Bureau cannot interfere at will during the applicable scenario. The spectacle of the blinding sunlight crumbling down, I couldn't even breathe properly as I focused solely on the battle itself. Ra's torso, cut by dark heavenly demon sword, began emitting bright light. Kugugugugu. Accompanied by an intense storm of heat, our vision was clouded by thick steam. A ploy to buy time, no doubt. Yu Yunghayok. Don't stop. I shouted out and desperately continued to read the fable. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is continuing on with its storytelling. Fable, Comrade of Life and Death, is amplifying the effects of other fables. I recalled the 1701st regression turn of Yu Yunghayok that I read in the past. Yu Yunghayok had fought against Poseidon one-on-one in that turn. On the border where the ocean's boundaries meet, Iron Blood conquering king unsheathed his sword. Poseidon. Today, you shall die. A life that carried on for 1700 lifetimes. The swordsmanship born out of this life now shone brilliantly. Yu Yonghyuk's blade moved as if to recreate that very battle. His sword gradually became faster and faster to utterly destroy Ra's sun. Constellation, midday sun, is enraged from the pain. Quagagagagaga. Yu Yonghyuk's blade continued to dance on the stage. I read into reality. An incredible storm of probabilities aftermath tried to crush me, but four great fables responded to each other and allowed me to endure the after effects. I still tasted iron in my mouth, though. My incarnation body was failing to cope with the sudden, abrupt increase in my status. Nebula, Vedas, is observing your battlefield. Nebula, Tamna, is observing your battlefield. Nebula, Olympus, is observing your battlefield. Nebula, Asgard, is observing your battlefield. Look all you want. This battle was meant for all of you to see, anyway. Channel's indirect message restriction has been lifted. Even now, many constellations would still be dismissive of our strength. They were probably thinking that we reached this far because of our luck and perhaps due to other constellations lending their aid to us. A large number of additional constellations are entering the channel. Absolute majority of constellations are observing your battle. However, this was now time to prove ourselves. Great fable, season of light and darkness, roaring out. Time to prove that Kim Dokja Company was not some poor sobs needing your sponsorships but your actual competitors, and that we were a nebula capable of bringing down a large nebula with our own powers. Quadududak. Yu Yonghyuk's sword slashes continued to corner Ra. The sunlight falling away made noises similar to actual flesh being ripped apart. It was then, I sensed a sharp glare coming from the empty air. Great Dakibi, Noxu, is glaring at you. Great Dakibi Noxu, not even a mid or low grade, but a great Dakibi. For someone like that, making the scenario rather inconvenient for us wouldn't be that difficult. However, even they couldn't intervene carelessly in the 98th scenario. Suchachachat. Because, the scenarios from now on would be of utmost importance to the Great Dakibis, as well. Great Dakibi and the Nebula are participating in the applicable scenario together. All Dakibis can select the candidate and its story they wish to tell. Great Dakibi Noxu has currently selected Papyrus. I recalled the moment when Great Dakibis Hyoju and Heech came to see us just before the climax of the Great War of Saints and Demons got underway. Back then, those Dakibis said this. You must decide now. Die in this place, or head off to the final scenario with us. Those words were suggestions meant for this very moment. Great Dakibis facing the end times must risk their reputation, their insight, and their own fables to select the candidates for the one final fable. And that bastard named Noxu must have chosen Papyrus as its candidate. According to the legend, there are 3 sons in Papyrus. I spoke in true voice as Yu Yonghyuk's incarnation body moved again. With a speed faster than anyone in this universe, he swung his sword filled with the Eternity's curse. Sharp strikes from the dark heavenly demon sword dug deeply into Ra's skin. The deity's temperature, reputed to be capable of melting any metal, was being ably resisted by Yi Hyansong's fable metal. With a loud rupture, Ra's heart spewed out a fable. That noble and lofty myth-grade constellation was being destroyed by our hands. If you were really planning to cut us down, then you should have descended with all of yourselves first. The myth-grade constellation, Ra. A constellation who had reached his own conclusion, and had been hibernating within the final scenario stage for a very long time. You think that someone like you, stuck inside a freezer until now, can win against us with just a single sun? Constellation, Midday Sun, is screaming in pain. Constellation, Midday Sun, is urgently scanning his vicinity. Just how long will you sit back and watch? Ra's shouting caused the stars of the sky to sparkle. Vedas. Olympus. Did you not all agree to participate together? What? At the end of those words, ominous auras began rushing in from the distance. The skies thrashed about and the sounds of crashing waves could be heard. The middle of pitch-black sky split up and an enormous current of water flooded out. We quickly moved out of the way and dodged the waves of that status. Someone has announced his support to the nebula, Papyrus. Someone is incarnating into the scenario. It was a possessor of a status powerful enough to send shivers down my spine. Someone who could equal RA before us was now descending into this world. How pathetic, RA. Did you not declare that you alone would be sufficient for this matter? A voice reminding me of violent tidal waves resounded out. Quite surprisingly, the existence that descended to this place was the very enemy Yu Young-hyuk of the 1701st turn fought off desperately. Constellation, the spear that draws the boundaries of the oceans, is incarnating to this scenario. Accompanying Poseidon's entrance were the stars of the heavens rushing in like storm clouds. They were fable-grade constellations from Vedas and Locapula. To make matters worse, among them were individuals known to be almost on the level of myth-grade constellations, as well. Nebula, Tamna, is condemning Veda's intervention. Nebula, Hongik, is condemning Olympus' intervention. Condemnation rained down. Completely not caring about that, Poseidon simply pointed his trident, Triana, in our direction. How dare measly beings such as yourselves try to witness the end of this star stream? The end of Star Stream, the epilogue that determined the conclusion of all the worlds. Right, I had been waiting for a long time to witness it. That was true. I don't simply wish to see the end, actually. In all honesty, what I really wanted to see was a juicy. My comrades had gathered around me even before I had noticed it. Zhang Huiwen, Yu Seng'a, Yi Jihai, Yi Hyansong, Yi Gilyong, and Xin Yusung. The fables we had created together were shining brightly in the empty night sky. I saw the trajectory of the fables we've used beyond the galaxy in the far distance. No matter how wide and expansive this universe was, I was confident of locating that very set of constellations regardless of where I was. Fable, Demon King of Salvation, is shining brightly. Fable, King of Kingless World, is shining brightly. Great Fable, Torch that swallowed the myth, is shining brightly. I had all signs of emotions welling up in my heart and looked at my companions. That was where the fable he longed for could be found. Poseidon, emitting powerful status, extended his hand towards us. What a noisy little full stop you are. Now, disappear. Veda's army rushed in. My companions tensed up and gathered around me. I addressed them. I love the fable I managed to create with all of you. Although we encountered many painful, sad things, even then, I loved this story so much so that I wished for it to continue on forever. That's not your final wish, now is it? Zhang Huiwen asked after seeing my expression. She probably sensed something ominous from it. I simply smiled back at her before staring at the empty skies beyond the nebula's army rushing in at us. My mother once told me this. A person who watched a certain story for a long time would eventually grow to resemble that story. Perhaps that logic also applied to these stars, too. Just before the tsunami wave of Veda's army pounced on us, though. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is incarnating into the scenario. The night sky split up and the waterfall made out of hellish flames flooded out. A lone constellation riding on the fiery waves started massacring other constellations with her sword burning in flames. The archangel that I liked the best was right there. CKU. You king bastards. The true voices of constellations freaking out could be heard over that torrent of expletives. But, how? You were definitely. CK, man. I'm Oriel. You think you can kill me with such measly little numbers? Right after her, purple-colored intense flames burned the heavens. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is incarnating into the scenario. Kakik, to think you'd make me use both of my hands. You did well, Papyrus. The wings of a massive flying dragon tore and crushed through the constellations. Veda's battleships took aim at the black flame dragon and got ready to fire. And in the following moment, dozens of vessels began exploding one after another along with loud booms. One could spy the golden-colored Rui Jingu Bang flitting in between the explosions. "You're really making it so annoying, aren't you?" Once the smoke cleared, a platinum-haired man could be seen standing there, digging his ear as if he was quite bored right now. Constellation, most ancient liberator, is incarnating into the scenario. Uriel, black flame dragon, and the great sage, heaven's equal. These three's entrance caused unrest to spread out. Great sage. What is the meaning of this? This is internebula warfare. Do you understand what you're trying to do? Even before the enraged true voices of the constellations could finish, someone else announced their support to our cause. "Just like you, we also have a fable we wish to support, that's all." I knew whose voice that was. Pitch black yet gentle darkness wrapped around us, and a loving hand touched my shoulder. Constellation, queen of the darkest spring, is incarnating into the scenario. And if she was here, then that meant. Constellation, father of the rich night, is incarnating into the scenario. The king of underworld's cold eyes scanned the battlefield. Here he was, the grim reaper of death, capable of making all the stars shiver in fear. First, it was the great sage, and now, the king of underworld, too. The constant appearances of myth-grade constellations caused the enemy constellations to hesitate and retreat. Nebula Underworld is supporting Kim Dokja Company. The two camps emitted powerful statuses and confronted each other as if to goad the other side to attack first. I could see the crumpled expressions of Poseidon and Ra in the distance. And how long went by like this? Constellations from one camp began retreating without saying anything. Constellation, spear that draws the boundaries of the oceans, is exiting from this scenario. The enemy constellations began disappearing one by one. Their rate of exit grew faster now that a myth-grade constellation they placed so much faith in had left the scene. The panicking Papyrus S constellations looked around in confusion, all the while cautiously studying Ra's reaction. And eventually, Nebula Papyrus has announced the withdrawal of its constellations. Not too long after, only the half-crushed sun remained. Ra gritted its teeth noisily and glared at us, but before long, the sounds of a star scattering away could be heard. Constellation, midday sun, is exiting from the scenario. The glow of setting sun filled the sky and the bright ball of fire disappeared below the horizon. Finally, this scenario's victors had been decided. And this is the sight Kim Dokja longed to see for a very long time. Within the sunset's soft glow, I looked back to my companions. Some things didn't work out as he had been hoping. While staring at the disappearing sunlight, Yu Yonghyuk was still gripping the dark heavenly demon sword tightly. Meanwhile, some things went better than he expected. Han Suyang, her lips twitching slightly, hurriedly wrapped the bandages around her arm while going, "Ouch, ouch, ouch." There were moments where they got lucky irrelevant of their intentions. Yu Sang sighed gently and smiled back at me. However, all those events came together to create this very moment in time. Nebula, Kim Dokja Company, has won the Internebula Warfare. Reward payout is being prepared. Both the companions and I didn't say anything. This wasn't our first victory, but in a certain sense, it was indeed our first victory. For a long time there, we didn't say a word and stared at each other's faces. We won. We really emerged victorious against another nebula. Great Dakibi, Hyoju is gasping after seeing your fable. Great Dakibi, Garong wishes to vote for your fable. Great Dakibi, Hazel wishes to. Only the system messages floated up in the empty air now. Great Dakibi, Baihyung has voted for your fable. Mid-rank Dakibi, Bu likes your story very much. I watched the shadows of two Dakibis cast by the setting sun and began thinking to myself. We were almost there. I turned my head towards the companions once more. I wanted to say something to them while looking at them. But they all carried expressions of already knowing what I wanted to say. Zhang Huiwen spoke up instead of me. Let's go and witness the conclusion of this world. Together. I nodded my head.